Respected, he left you for someone else. And right now it feels like your entire world has been shaken. But what if the greatest mistake he ever made becomes the greatest opportunity you ever receive? Stay with me, because today you are going to discover why the moment he walked away was not the end of your story. It was the beginning of your transformation. The day someone leaves you for another person feels different from every other kind of heartbreak. It is not just rejection, it is replacement. And replacement cuts deeper, because when someone breaks up with you, you can tell yourself that the relationship simply did not work. You can tell yourself that two people grew apart. You can tell yourself that life happened. But when they leave you for someone else, your mind immediately begins asking questions that steal your peace. What does she have that I don't? Why wasn't I enough? Was everything we shared a lie? Did our memories mean nothing? And before you realize it, you are no longer grieving the relationship. You are questioning your worth. That is where the real damage begins, because heartbreak can heal. But when heartbreak turns into self-doubt, it creates wounds that follow you everywhere. I want to tell you a story. Not because stories are entertaining, but because stories reveal truths we often cannot see inside our own lives. A woman named Rachel once believed she had found her forever person. For 6 years, she invested everything into her relationship. She showed up when things were difficult. She supported his dreams. She stood beside him during financial struggles. She celebrated his victories. She loved him through seasons when nobody else would. When he felt lost, she encouraged him. When he doubted himself, she reminded him of his value. When he wanted to quit, she helped him keep going. Rachel wasn't perfect. Nobody is. But she loved sincerely, and she believed that sincerity would be enough. Then one afternoon, her entire world changed. She noticed his behavior becoming different. The phone calls became shorter. The messages became colder. The affection disappeared. The excitement faded. And the connection that once felt effortless suddenly felt forced. At first, she blamed stress, then work, then life. She made excuses because sometimes the heart protects itself from painful truths. But eventually the truth arrived anyway. He had met someone else. And one day he sat across from her and said words she would never forget. I think I found someone who makes me happier. Imagine hearing that from the person you gave your heart to. Imagine hearing that after years of loyalty. Imagine hearing that after sacrificing pieces of yourself to build a future together. Rachel felt something break inside her, not because she lost him, but because she lost the version of herself that believed love was safe. For weeks, she barely slept. She replayed every conversation, every argument, every memory, every moment, searching for answers, searching for mistakes, searching for reasons. But pain has a way of creating illusions. When we are hurting, we often assume that if someone leaves, it means someone else was better. That is rarely true. And this is the first lesson I need every person listening today to understand. People do not always leave because they found something better. Sometimes they leave because they are chasing something easier. There is a difference. Something better requires wisdom. Something easier requires impulse. Many people mistake excitement for compatibility. They mistake attention for connection. They mistake novelty for love. And because of that, they walk away from valuable things while chasing temporary feelings. The new relationship feels exciting because it is new. There are no shared disappointments, no difficult conversations, no accumulated frustrations, no responsibilities. Everything feels light. Everything feels easy. Everything feels perfect. But perfection is often an illusion that exists before reality arrives. The problem is that when someone leaves you for another person, you don't get to see that reality. You only seek appears to be happiness, and appearances can be dangerous. Rachel spent months watching social media. She watched pictures. She watched updates. She watched smiles. And every image felt like another knife in her heart, because from the outside, it looked like he had upgraded his life. It looked like she was thriving while Rachel was suffering. It looked like the universe had rewarded betrayal. Have you ever felt that way? Have you ever looked at someone's life after they hurt you and wondered why they seemed perfectly fine while you were carrying the pain? That feeling can consume you. It can make you bitter. It can make you angry. It can make you obsessed with proving your worth. And that is exactly where many people make a mistake. Because after being left for someone else, their entire focus shifts toward one goal: getting them back, making them regret leaving, showing them what they lost. And while that reaction is understandable, it is also dangerous, because your healing cannot depend on someone else's regret. Think about that. If your happiness depends on another person realizing their mistake, then you are still giving them control over your life. You are still allowing them to determine your value. You are still waiting for permission to feel worthy. And worthy people do not wait for permission. Rachel almost fell into that trap. She wanted revenge, not loud revenge, not dramatic revenge, the quiet kind, the kind where she imagined him returning and begging for another chance, the kind where she imagined finally rejecting him, the kind where she imagined proving that she had become better without him. But one evening, something happened that changed everything. She was sitting alone in her apartment. The television was on, but she wasn't watching. Her phone was in her hand. She was scrolling through old photographs, reliving memories, torturing herself. And suddenly she noticed something. Every picture contained a version of herself she barely recognized. A woman whose happiness depended entirely on whether someone loved her. A woman who measured her value through another person's attention. A woman who forgot that she existed before the relationship. And that realization hit her harder than the breakup itself, because she finally understood something. She had spent so much time trying to keep someone in her life that she stopped building her own. That moment became a turning point. Not because the pain disappeared, the pain was still there. Not because she suddenly stopped caring, she still cared deeply. But for the first time, she asked a different question. Instead of asking, why wasn't I enough for him? She asked, why did I forget I was enough for myself? That question changed everything. Because healing begins when the focus returns to you. Not your ex, not the new person, not the relationship. You, the person who still has dreams, the person who still has value, the person who still has a future, the person who still deserves happiness. Most people never realize this. They spend years trying to understand the person who left, analyzing behavior, searching for explanations, looking for closure, when the real breakthrough comes from understanding themselves. You see, the goal is not to figure out why someone abandoned you. The goal is to remember why you should never abandon yourself. And that is exactly where Rachel's journey truly began. Because the moment she stopped chasing answers from him, she started discovering strength within herself. A strength she didn't know existed. A strength that had been hidden beneath heartbreak. A strength that would eventually transform every area of her life. But transformation never begins with confidence. It begins with a decision. A decision to stop making your pain your identity. A decision to stop allowing betrayal to define your future. A decision to believe that one person's choice does not determine your worth. And for Rachel, that decision was about to lead her down a path she never expected. A path that would eventually reveal why some relationships that begin with excitement often collapse under the weight of reality, and why the people who leave are not always as happy as they appear. Because sometimes what looks like a beautiful beginning is the start of an ending nobody sees coming. For the first few weeks after Rachel made that decision, nothing magical happened. She did not wake up one morning feeling healed. She did not suddenly stop thinking about him. She did not become stronger overnight. In fact, some days felt worse. Because when you stop distracting yourself, you finally face the emotions you have been avoiding. And emotions demand to be felt before they can be released. Many people think healing is about forgetting. It is not. Healing is remembering without breaking. Healing is looking at the past and no longer allowing it to control your future. Rachel learned this lesson one painful day at a time. She started spending less time checking his social media. Then she stopped altogether, not because she no longer cared, but because she realized every visit was reopening a wound she was trying to close. Every picture she viewed became another comparison. Every update became another opportunity to question herself. And comparison is one of the fastest ways to destroy your peace. You see, when someone leaves you for another person, your mind naturally creates a competition. You compare your appearance, your personality, your accomplishments, your value. But love was never supposed to be a competition. The moment you start comparing yourself to someone else, you stop appreciating who you are. Rachel slowly began rebuilding parts of her life she had neglected. She joined a fitness class, not because she wanted revenge, not because she wanted him back, but because she wanted to feel strong again. She started reading books she had ignored for years. She reconnected with old friends. She traveled to places she had always wanted to visit. Little by little, she stopped waiting for life to happen. She started participating in it, and something fascinating began to occur. The more she focused on her own growth, the less power the breakup held over her. The memories still existed, but they no longer controlled her emotions. The pain still appeared, but it no longer defined her identity. And this is where many people misunderstand what happens after heartbreak. They think the goal is to stop feeling. The real goal is to stop living in reaction to what happened. There is a huge difference, because when you live in reaction, your ex is still controlling your life. Everything you do becomes connected to them. Every achievement is for them to see. Every success is for them to notice. Every improvement is for them to regret losing. That is not freedom. Freedom arrives when your growth belongs to you, when your happiness belongs to you, when your future belongs to you. Several months passed, and then something unexpected happened. Rachel ran into a mutual friend. During their conversation, his name came up. At first, her heart raced. Old emotions returned. Old memories resurfaced. But then the friend casually mentioned something surprising. Things were not as perfect as they appeared. The new relationship was struggling. Arguments had become frequent. Tension had replaced excitement. The connection that once looked effortless was becoming complicated. Rachel was shocked, not because she wanted him to suffer, but because reality was finally appearing. The perfect picture she had imagined was cracking. And suddenly she understood something powerful. Every relationship eventually reaches a stage where excitement fades and character takes over. At the beginning, attraction carries the relationship. Later, maturity must carry it. At the beginning, chemistry creates momentum. Later, commitment creates stability. At the beginning, everything feels easy. Later, effort becomes necessary. The problem is that many people fall in love with beginnings, but they are not prepared for what comes after. They chase butterflies. They chase novelty. They chase excitement. And when reality arrives, they feel disappointed. What they fail to understand is that every relationship eventually becomes real. No matter how exciting the start may be, no matter how attractive the person may seem, no matter how perfect everything appears, reality always arrives. And reality asks difficult questions. Can you communicate? Can you forgive? Can you grow together? Can you stay when life becomes difficult? Can you choose love when emotions fluctuate? Those questions determine the future of a relationship, not attraction, not excitement, not temporary feelings. Rachel began seeing the situation differently. For months, she had assumed he was living a dream, but now she realized something. People often leave one set of problems only to discover another set waiting for them. Because no relationship is free from challenges. The person changes, the location changes, the circumstances change, but human nature remains the same. Every relationship requires work. Every relationship faces difficulties. Every relationship eventually reveals flaws. That realization freed her from a burden she had been carrying, the burden of believing she had been replaced by perfection, because perfection does not exist, not in relationships, not in people, not in life. And when you finally understand that, you stop viewing yourself as the loser in someone else's story. You start recognizing that your story is still being written. One evening, Rachel was sitting with her grandmother, a woman whose wisdom came not from books, but from decades of experience. As they talked, Rachel shared everything: the heartbreak, the betrayal, the questions, the fears. Her grandmother listened quietly. Then she said something Rachel would never forget. She said, "Sometimes God removes people from your life because he knows where they are taking you." Rachel sat silently. Her grandmother continued. She said, "The pain comes from losing what you wanted. But years later, gratitude often comes from not getting it." Those words stayed with her because she realized she had been viewing the breakup as a punishment. What if it was preparation? What if losing him was protecting her from a future she could not yet see? What if the ending she feared was actually a redirection? Life has a strange way of revealing answers later. Not immediately, not when we demand them, but eventually. Many people listening right now are still holding on to someone who walked away, not because they were right for you, but because you imagined a future with them. And losing that future hurts. Sometimes you are grieving a dream more than a person. You are grieving the wedding you imagined, the family you imagined, the life you imagined, the version of tomorrow you thought was guaranteed. But life does not end when a dream changes. Sometimes a better dream begins. Rachel slowly stopped asking whether he would come back and started asking who she was becoming. That shift changed everything. Because the most powerful question after heartbreak is not, will they regret losing me? The most powerful question is, what kind of person will I become because of this experience? Will you become bitter or wiser? Will you become angry or stronger? Will you become broken or transformed? Pain always gives us a choice, not about what happened, but about who we become afterward. And Rachel chose growth. She chose healing. She chose herself. What she did not know was that somewhere in another part of the city, the man who left her was beginning to face truths of his own. Truths that many people never expect. Truths about regret. Truths about consequences. Truths about the difference between chasing happiness and creating it. Because while Rachel was rebuilding her life, he was about to discover that running towards something new does not automatically solve the problems you carry within yourself. And when that realization finally arrived, it would change everything. Months had passed. The seasons changed. The pain that once felt unbearable had become quieter, not gone, but quieter. Rachel no longer woke up every morning thinking about him. She no longer spent hours wondering what he was doing. She no longer replayed old conversations searching for hidden meanings. For the first time in a long time, she was beginning to feel something she thought she had lost forever. Peace, not excitement, not revenge, not validation, peace. And peace is one of the most valuable things a person can possess. Because when your heart finally becomes calm, you stop making decisions from pain. You start making decisions from wisdom. What Rachel didn't know was that while she was learning how to live again, the man who left her was learning something very different. He was learning that escaping a relationship is much easier than escaping yourself. At first, everything had felt exactly as he imagined. The new relationship was exciting. There were no old arguments, no painful memories, no complicated history. Every conversation felt fresh. Every date felt exciting. Every moment felt effortless. He convinced himself he had made the right decision. In his mind, he had chosen happiness. But life has a way of testing our decisions. Not immediately, but eventually. Because eventually the honeymoon phase ends. Eventually the excitement becomes ordinary. Eventually two people begin seeing each other clearly. Not the polished version, not the exciting version, the real version. And that is where many relationships face their greatest challenge. You see, attraction can bring two people together, but character determines whether they stay together. As time passed, he started noticing things he had ignored before. Small disagreements became larger. Misunderstandings became more frequent. Expectations started colliding. The relationship that once felt effortless now required work, and work was exactly what he had been trying to avoid. One night after a particularly difficult argument, he sat alone in his car. The silence felt heavy. For the first time in months, he thought about Rachel, not because he stopped caring about the new relationship, but because reality had finally arrived, and reality has a strange way of forcing comparisons. Not comparisons of appearance, not comparisons of excitement, comparisons of substance. He remembered how Rachel supported him during difficult times. He remembered how she understood his weaknesses. He remembered how she stood beside him when life became complicated. Things he once took for granted suddenly seemed valuable. And that is one of the biggest mistakes people make. They often recognize value only after they lose access to it. Think about how often this happens in life. People take health for granted until sickness arrives. They take family for granted until distance separates them. They take opportunities for granted until those opportunities disappear. And sadly, many people take loyal partners for granted until they are gone. The problem is that appreciation delayed often becomes regret, and regret is one of the heaviest emotions a human being can carry. Because regret forces you to live with the truth you cannot change, the truth that you knew better, the truth that you could have acted differently, the truth that your choices created consequences. Meanwhile, Rachel's life continued moving forward. She had started volunteering at a local community center. She met new people, learned new skills, created new experiences. Most importantly, she rediscovered parts of herself she had abandoned. The woman who once believed her future depended on a relationship was slowly becoming someone who understood her future depended on her choices. That shift changed her energy. People noticed. Friends noticed, coworkers noticed, even strangers noticed. Because confidence built through healing looks different from confidence built through attention. One depends on approval. The other depends on self-respect. And self-respect changes everything. One afternoon, Rachel was having lunch with a close friend. During the conversation, her friend asked a simple question. If he called today and asked for another chance, what would you do? Months earlier, Rachel would have answered immediately. She would have said yes, without hesitation, without conditions, without questions. But now she paused, not because she hated him, not because she wanted revenge, but because she had changed. And growth changes the questions we ask. She finally responded, I don't know. Her friend looked surprised. Rachel smiled. Then she said something powerful. I spent so much time trying to convince him not to leave. Now I would need to convince myself why he should return. That statement revealed how far she had come. Because healing is not about becoming unavailable. It is about becoming discerning. It is about understanding that access to your heart should be earned, not assumed. Many people think self-love means believing you are better than everyone else. That is not self-love. Self-love means understanding your value and refusing to bargain it away. It means recognizing that your kindness is valuable. Your loyalty is valuable. Your time is valuable. Your energy is valuable. And anyone who receives those things should appreciate them. Around this same time, something unexpected happened. The man who left Rachel began hearing about her transformation. Mutual friends mentioned how well she was doing, how confident she seemed, how happy she looked, how much she had grown. At first, he dismissed it. Then curiosity appeared. Then curiosity became interest. And eventually, interest became something else, regret. Not because Rachel had become famous, not because she had become wealthy, not because she had found someone new, but because she had become the person she was always capable of becoming. And suddenly he realized something painful. The woman he left behind was not the woman standing before him. Now she was stronger, wiser, more confident, more complete. And for the first time, he began wondering whether he had made a mistake. Now listen carefully because this is important. Many people fantasize about this moment. They dream about the day their ex regrets leaving. They imagine how satisfying it will feel, how validating it will be, how healing it will become. But the truth surprises most people. By the time genuine healing occurs, external validation loses much of its power. Because once you truly know your worth, you no longer need someone else to confirm it. Rachel was reaching that point. She no longer needed him to regret leaving. She no longer needed him to suffer. She no longer needed him to choose her because she had finally chosen herself. And when you choose yourself, everything changes. The desperation disappears. The chasing disappears. The obsession disappears. You stop trying to convince people to see your value. You simply become unwilling to stay where your value is ignored. That is real growth. Not becoming cold, not becoming bitter, not becoming emotionally unavailable, becoming secure. And secure people operate differently. They understand that rejection does not reduce their worth. They understand that someone else's decision does not define their identity. They understand that being left behind is painful, but abandoning yourself is far worse. One evening, nearly a year after the breakup, Rachel received a message, a simple message, a familiar name. Her heart skipped for a moment, not because she still depended on him, but because some chapters leave marks even after they close. She stared at the screen, thinking, reflecting, remembering. And as she looked at those words, she realized something remarkable. The woman reading that message was not the same woman who cried herself to sleep months earlier. The woman reading that message was someone entirely different, someone stronger, someone wiser, someone who finally understood a truth most people spend years trying to learn. Sometimes the greatest revenge is not making someone regret losing you. Sometimes the greatest revenge is creating a life so meaningful that their regret becomes irrelevant. And that realization was about to prepare Rachel for the most important lesson of her entire journey. A lesson about forgiveness, a lesson about freedom, a lesson about why the person who truly wins after heartbreak is not the one who moves on first, but the one who grows the most. Rachel stared at the message for a long time, not because she did not know what to say, but because she realized she no longer felt what she expected to feel. Months earlier, seeing his name would have filled her with hope, or pain, or longing. Now she simply felt calm, and that calmness surprised her more than the message itself. The words on the screen were simple. He asked how she was doing. He said he had been thinking about her. He admitted there were things he wished he had handled differently. Nothing dramatic, nothing poetic, just the kind of message that often arrives when reality catches up with people. For a moment, Rachel reflected on everything that had happened. The night she cried herself to sleep, the morning she forced herself out of bed, the countless moments she doubted her worth, the days she thought she would never recover. And then she thought about who she had become, the strength she discovered, the confidence she built, the peace she earned. She finally understood something many people never realize. The person who broke your heart can become part of your story without remaining part of your future. That realization changed everything because too many people believe healing means getting the relationship back. Others believe healing means hating the person forever. Neither is true. Healing means reaching a place where your happiness is no longer connected to what they choose. Whether they stay, whether they leave, whether they regret it, whether they don't, your peace remains yours, and that is real freedom. Rachel eventually replied, not out of bitterness, not out of desperation, but from a place of maturity, a place she had fought hard to reach. The conversation remained respectful, simple, honest. And during that exchange, something became clear. The man who once left believing he was chasing something better had discovered something difficult. New people do not erase old lessons. New relationships do not automatically create happiness. And running from problems often leads you directly into new ones. He admitted that the relationship he left for had ended. Not suddenly, not dramatically. It simply fell apart under the weight of reality. The excitement that once seemed so powerful eventually faded. The differences became impossible to ignore. The challenges became impossible to avoid. And the future they imagined never materialized. Rachel listened, but something interesting happened. Instead of feeling victorious, she felt compassionate because growth had changed her perspective. She understood that life teaches everyone eventually. Some lessons arrive through success, others arrive through regret, but everyone learns, and sometimes the people who hurt us end up carrying wounds of their own. That does not excuse their actions. It simply reminds us that human beings are imperfect. One of the greatest signs of healing is when you stop needing someone to suffer in order to feel whole. Think about that. How many people spend years waiting for karma, waiting for revenge, waiting for life to punish someone who hurt them? Meanwhile, their own happiness remains delayed. Their own future remains paused. Their own healing remains incomplete because they are still emotionally connected to the person who caused the pain. Rachel finally understood that forgiveness was never about him. It was about her. Forgiveness did not mean forgetting. It did not mean pretending nothing happened. It did not mean inviting someone back into her life. Forgiveness simply meant refusing to carry the weight forever. Because carrying anger is like carrying a heavy suitcase through life. Eventually, it exhausts you more than anyone else. And Rachel was tired of carrying unnecessary weight. She wanted freedom, she wanted peace, she wanted a future larger than her pain. As the months continued passing, Rachel noticed something remarkable. The breakup that once felt like the worst thing that ever happened to her had become one of the most important experiences of her life. Not because it was enjoyable, not because it was fair, but because it forced her to grow. Before the heartbreak, she relied heavily on external validation. After the heartbreak, she learned self-respect. Before the heartbreak, she feared being alone. After the heartbreak, she discovered her own strength. Before the heartbreak, she measured her worth through someone else's love. After the heartbreak, she understood her value existed independently. That transformation changed